So today's subject matter is Space Invaders for the Nintendo Famicom, released in 1985 in Japan only. This version of Space Invaders never made it over to the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America, so the only way you could have played this was either through an import or hope you lucked out on one of those multicart things, which is where I'm playing it, so there we go, let's check this out. The opening screen sets the tone for how this port is going to appear. Rather than giving you a fancy title screen, Space Invaders on the Famicom opts to recreate the attract mode of the arcade original. And look kids, there's even color. Rather than stick with the black and white monochrome setup, Space Invaders on the Famicom opts to simulate the cellophane color layers, so there's semblance of color. So as the invaders are descending downwards until they take over the world that you are defending, they change color. Of course, the illusion of cellophane simulation is ruined when your ship blows up and everything turns red. But hey, it's the thought that counts, I suppose. In any case, visually speaking, Space Invaders looks the part. You have your Space Invaders on top, you have your shield retaining their usual shape, you have your turret. The typeface they use is your regular Nintendo font that they have in a lot of older Famicom games, but that's to be expected. And while the invaders themselves are somewhat smaller compared to the arcade original, they do resemble their arcade counterparts. You could sort of make out the shapes just fine. And the game runs rather smoothly for the most part. There's no flicker, there's no slowdown, which for a game like this to have slowdown or flicker, then you have problems. And where there is problems, I have to say, is in the sound department. Now mind you, it's not all bad. They got the background beat down to a T, more or less. The explosions sound nice, but when you kill an invader, it sounds like a tweet rather than any proper explosion. Even the original arcade game had more appropriate exploding invader sounds than this version. The whirling sound when the UFO passes by, it sounds good. It's the tweeting, exploding invaders that twitter around and anyways, never mind. Anyways, that's the only distressful thing. Anyways, let's get to the gameplay of Space Invaders, which is, if anyone's played the original Space Invaders arcade game or any other adaptation of the game, it's pretty much old hat. You have a bunch of invaders descending upon thee, and you have to clear the whole wave before they touch down on the surface, at which point the game ends. Of course, the game also ends the traditional means if you've exhausted all your lives. For the most part, it plays and acts like a traditional game of Space Invaders. Invaders go down, you kill them. Fewer invaders that are remaining, the faster the group falls. Occasionally you get a UFO that you could shoot for bonus points. And when you reach 1500 points, you get an extra turret. And once you clear a wave of invaders, you move on to the next wave where you get to do the whole thing all over again. And that's pretty much Space Invaders in a nutshell. There's not much else to the gameplay. And to its credit, the Famicom version does a nice job of replicating this style of gameplay. It's traditional Space Invaders, plays exactly like traditional Space Invaders, control works about as well as you would expect. The D-pad moved your ship around, the buttons fired your shots, you can only have one shot. It follows the traditional rules of Space Invaders. It's a fairly accurate port of Space Invaders in terms of the gameplay. You can't say much about the sound because it's all tweet sounds, and the visuals, the invaders are a little smaller than compared to other versions, but for the most part, they look the part. And I'd imagine if you were a Famicom owner living in Japan in 1985 and you wanted a good version of Space Invaders, a quality version of Space Invaders to call your own, you could do no wrong with this version. It's a rather respectable, quality adaptation of a classic arcade game. That having been said, however, unless you're looking to fill a hole in your Famicom collection, I wouldn't actually go out of my way to get this version. Even though it does a good version of Space Invaders, I'm not taking anything away from it, but at the same time, it doesn't really do anything that you can't get from any other version available on any of the other home formats available at the time or since. I mean, there's the Atari 2600 version, there's the homebrew Atari 7800 version, there's the Game Boy version, there's the Super Nintendo version, there's the various arcade compilations from the Taito on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other versions. This thing's been ported anywhere and everywhere over the years, so it's not impossible to get a pure version of Space Invaders out there. If you're a Famicom collector, you're missing a hole, you want to add this to the pile, add it to the pile. But if you go through life never playing this version of Space Invaders, you're not missing much. You've already played it in some other form anyways. And there you go. That's an hour's worth of dubbing for essentially 5 minutes of audio. Go me. At least the next one's in the can. Wait.